public square of the exchange of ideas. So I host a podcast with a couple friars, and then I'm the editor of our Sunday Visitor at National Catholic Magazine.
And people can see your work there and widely. So let's talk about the church itself in America. There are some 53 million Catholics, right? The mission is to obviously grow that or not erode. What are your thoughts on who the next pope should be for that to happen? Or the type of person that should be for that to happen?
It's an incredible question, because when you start thinking about the influence that the Church in the United States has, it's very disproportionate to our actual population. The Catholics in the United States make up about 7% of Catholics in the world, which is not so much. But we know that it's Catholics in the U.S. that contribute substantially to the finances of the Vatican, to the Holy See, and to the world's important humanitarian projects. And that represents a kind of outside voice. And there are many concerns that come along with that. Of course, one is the concern for increased transparency when it comes to Vatican finances, for accountability to resolve the ongoing clerical sexual abuse crisis. But underneath, and even more important than those things, I think, for Catholics in the United States, is a call for a pope who would be very evangelical, who would have a kind of spirit, a charisma to go out to the world, to continue to build up the life of the Church, to engage those Catholics that have fallen away, that are disengaged, and to really reach out to people and bring them in.
So are we talking another Francis, or go in a different direction, shall we say?
I think it will be impossible to get away from the Pope's kind of style. I mean, whoever succeeds him will have to have that kind of sense of energy, but it'll probably be mixed with, as the cardinals have been talking about, greater clarity and a little bit more theological precision.
One more thought. What are you feeling here with this show of humanity? There are thousands upon thousands of people in this vicinity right now. What's it like? How do you describe it?
I'm just grinning from ear to ear, because it's so beautiful to see how diverse the Church actually is. The whole world is on display here. I saw a little flag from Slovenia as I was walking in, and I thought, well, there's not a Slovenian contender, but there are people here very excited to represent themselves, and you see it all throughout the square.
Right, you bet. Father, thank you. Really appreciate your insight. And guys, as we send it back to you, literally people from everywhere here, people on a pilgrimage, people who just happen to be on vacation, people trying to soak in this moment, and we're here to share it with them.
Maurice Dubois, thank you. And as we are seeing each of these cardinal electors individually take the oath in Latin, promising, vowing, and swearing, saying, "So help me God," in this particular moment. And as you can see, some people may recognize Cardinal Dolan there of New York. Let's listen for a moment as he makes his and takes his oath.
Cardinalis Dolan, spondio, lovio, ac juro, sic me Deus adjuvit et haec sancta Dei Evangelia quae manu mea tango.
Language, Tim Dolan, it sounds like Tim Dolan.
even in, yes. Well, go ahead, Delia. Yes.
I mentioned that Cardinal Harvey, another American, is just coming up after this cardinal, who has a long service over here in the Pope's household. He's a reserved American. Not a lot of Americans probably know him, because I think most of his life has been spent over here. And he's now at the Basilica of St. Paul outside the walls. This is Cardinal Harvey.
27 years, we said that Cardinal Harvey was the second most photographed man in the world, because he served as the head of John Paul's papal household. So whenever John Paul appeared in public, Harvey was just to his right. So there are countless millions of photographs in which he appears.
As we watch this, though, I can't help but wondering what's going through the minds of each of these men. We always say in America that every senator looks in the mirror and sees a president. They are human, after all. Do they not look in the mirror this morning and see a future pope?
Yes, in fact, here we have Cardinal Muller, who was very critical of Pope Francis, really asking for a non-heretical pope. He was so outspoken in these congregations. And coming up right behind him is the Cardinal Archbishop of Westminster, Cardinal Vincent Nichols. It just shows to us how varied this conclave is. 55 nations have a single elector.
And many of those nations are sending an elector for the very first time.
Very first time.
And the gaps in there's shared belief and yet different interpretations of some of the teachings. And so you have a result where Francis may and his papacy recommend path A, and then the African archbishop wants a special dispensation for something a little bit different. And that's part of what the challenge is for this next pope, to balance these different competing perspectives and ideologies around the world.
We saw precisely the scenario you mentioned actually play out during the latter persons in same-sex unions. And the African bishops en masse rose up and said, we can't do persons in same-sex unions. And the African bishops en masse rose up and said, we can't do that in our pastoral situation. And in the end, Francis gave them permission not to apply that document in their backyard. So you're right, Tony. The trying to put together all of the different experiences and outlooks and priorities of a global church that is present in every nook and cranny of the planet, this is not easy.
But as some of the great reporting that has been done today about those very African cardinals, though, they did ask for some leniency when it came to polygamy.
Because that has been part of their cultural experience, let's be clear. Although many African bishops are very allergic to the idea of changing the rules on marriage today. For instance, giving communion to divorced and civilly remarried Catholics.
Which Pope Francis
also did in 2016. Because they will argue, excuse me, Father, because they will say, we have spent generations trying to tell our people marriage is one man, one woman for life, to sort of convince them to abandon polygamy. Now, if we move the goalposts, what does that mean?
Yeah, what were you going to say, Monsignor? Yes.
Which is why this moment is so key and important. We're electing a pope whose first task is unity in the church, and Cardinal Ray alluded to that in his homily this morning. I was there, and it was striking. He said unity does not mean uniformity, but we do have a successor of Peter who is called to bring that unity. He is head of the College of Bishops. It is that man whom we are electing.
And given that, I think that they may ultimately choose. I know you may be reluctant to say a name publicly. You've told me privately, but I think that they may ultimately choose. I know you may be reluctant to say a name publicly. You've told me privately, but.
And I was reading your emails over your shoulder, so I know too.
Well, but maybe talk about that, because people say, will there be a Pope Francis II?
My great thought, and as you know, Nora, we don't wage bets as Catholics, do we? But I'm already wagering my bet on the Holy Spirit has already chosen the right man who will steady the ship.
Yeah.
I think that's what the cardinals are looking for.
Why does it need steadying? What do you mean? In what way?
Pope Francis was a wonderful pope in terms of mercy, compassion, going out to the peripheries. I experienced that personally. But in many ways, he was a revolutionary pope. He himself said, I like to make a mess. And that has shaken a church that is traditionally used to great order, great doctrine that never changes. Pope Francis really has shaken up the church.
You know, but I know we're going to talk about the contenders for a moment here, but I think as we talk about the need to steady the ship, we should also reset it in a way to say this is a tremendous moment of opportunity for the Catholic Church. After years of people walking away from the faith in America and Europe in particular, you have a moment in time with tremendous technological change where people are feeling isolated, alone. The modern world, the secular world is not giving them everything they want, and they are turning to some place. And this could be that place.
Tony, I think you're absolutely. We've had great popes in this century. We had St. John Paul II, who opened people's hearts. We had Pope Benedict, who filled people's hearts with great doctrine. We've had Pope Francis, who's told us, what do you do now that Pope John Paul opened your hearts, Pope Benedict filled your hearts? Go out to the peripheries, go out to the world. We want a pope now who takes all three. Wouldn't it be wonderful to have one pope, 3 in 1 now, okay, in the new pontiff?
And as the cardinals continue to take their oath, I think it's a good opportunity to talk about who some of the front runners are, and so we can show everybody who has risen to the top of the list based on our reporting and conversations. And John, let me ask you to, first of all, I think at the top of the list really is the Secretary of State, the man that's second in command here at the Vatican, Pietro Parolin. What do we know about him and his philosophy?
Well, Cardinal Parolin was born in northern Italy. He has spent virtually his entire adult life as part of the Vatican's diplomatic corps. Served in papal embassies in various parts of the world and then came back to Rome. He was, for a period of time,